CopBlock, there's now groups, offshoots in 41 states, and then in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, Holland. So it's growing. That to me is a good sign. You know, and again, at the end of the day, I would encourage you to act according to your conscience. They can, and I know this is like dramatic, but they can cage your body, but they can't cage your mind. And as long as we're today willing to stand on our principles, you know, it's easier for us to make a change today if we stand on our principles than it will be tomorrow, or for our kids to do so next generation. So I think it's important that we do speak out when we see wrongs and we do hold people accountable. And I know we're almost out of time, so I'll just end with this quote, you know, which is by Herbert Spencer, this essay he wrote, The Right to Ignore the State. He wrote 125 years ago. So The Right to Ignore the State. This for me was a very impactful reading because it showed me, hey, I don't need to work through this like centralized monopoly to try to change things. I can just withdraw my consent, and if we all do this, then it's a peaceful evolution. So he says, it is a mistake to assume that government must last forever. The institution marks a certain stage of civilization, is natural to a particular phase of human development. It is not essential but incidental. Feudalism, slavery, serfdom, all tyrannical institutions are merely the most vigorous kinds of rule springing out of and necessary to a bad state of man. The progress from these is in all cases the same, less government. And to me, I would say arbitrary external authority. I would say self-government is what we should strive for. So then he says less government. Thus, as the civilization advances, does government decay. So that's what I look at. I looked at this bad idea of government as a parasite, just like you know, it's a massive market distortion, it's wealth destruction, and you know, we're seeing millions of other people in this arbitrary political boundary being caged for engaging in actions that don't hurt anybody. So I would, you know, ideas have consequence. I know I'm repeating that, but it's definitely important, and we shouldn't be scared. We should know that if folks do us wrong, then you know, I'll try to get you back as much as I can. There's a lot of good people that will as well. So don't be scared, and don't you know, if you think it's important, then it's worth standing up for. And with that, I think we can achieve the tagline of the Free State Project, which is liberty in our lifetime. So.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has any comments or conversation points.
You were talking about incentives, and I think that the whole justice system is based on incentives that, rather than producing justice, actually, you know, produce, you know, more harm and destruction. And could you speak a little bit to what you know about the actual things that police get measured on for promotions, and you know, prosecutors, you know, how do they measure judges? Are they just, you know, is it just up to us to do complaints? And I mean, is there any? I mean, if you work for a company, you know, you've got a job description, and you know, how well you fill that job description is what produces raises and supports raises. My understanding is that it's actually just arrests and convictions. Is there anything other than that you know of that they're actually measured on?
I mean, I don't know. I've personally experienced, you know, myself and my colleague Adamo, you know, we got kidnapped and caged and a bunch of threats levied at us, and fast forward a year, everything's dropped, the 8 charges, 3 felonies, everything's dropped except for 3. Jury says not guilty, and the folks who initially were the actors who wronged us, who went into my RV without a warrant, and even that is, you know, just a piece of paper signed with a friend. But anyway, they got promoted. Most of those folks got promoted, and that's what happens in a lot of these cases. We saw that, like in the Minneapolis raid that I mentioned, like they get rewarded. So, I mean, I don't know, judges, sometimes they're elected, sometimes they're there for life. I don't know. I mean, the incentives are the proper incentives are non-existent in those scenarios because, you know, the court system, the legal land, just like policing, is based on a coercive monopoly, and they say we're the sole provider of justice. So But again, you're seeing a lot of people moving away from that and doing these private arbitrations and trying to do workarounds that don't involve those coercive institutions because people recognize that they don't bring about justice. So I don't know, as for like specific metrics, it probably is a lot of nepotism, a lot of, good old boy kind of stuff. I mean, there's really not any specific answer I can give. So, yeah.
I'm an ex-police officer, so I can kind of answer his question. At least my department, we had to take a test. And
Like a civil service test.
yes, because they wanted to make sure there was never any, like you said, nepotism or prejudice being used. And I know when I took a test to become a detective, I scored the highest. But the guy underneath me, who didn't score that much lower than me, got the job. And their excuse was because he grew up in that neighborhood, he grew up in that city, and he would be able to make connections with people that I couldn't. I bought it because he did know more people than I did. I didn't come from that state.
Right.
But we did have to take a test to promote. But the bigger departments, I don't know how they run.
But I mean, aren't there day-to-day measures? I mean, we all hear about the actual, ticket quota thing that.
No, that's not.
I mean, that doesn't exist, but somehow does. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
and actually the feds had a program with my department, and they were the ones that were saying this amount of tickets should be able to be written in this city in this amount of time, but it never came from our chief.
Nah. No.
We got cases, other than Pennsylvania, we got cases where the state police give grants to the local departments to do DUI checkpoints. So what they do is they give them a trailer and all the equipment. Each department from an area will give 2 officers, they don't go over their overtime budget, and they'll set up a suspicionless checkpoint. They're looking at if you've been drinking, they look at your license, your registration, your insurance card, and it's pure revenue generation.
Right, I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, did you guys file a Title 42 lawsuit?
Well, in Massachusetts, initially we did have, after we beat those charges, we did file a civil suit. We had Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers as our attorney, but we ended up, he was busy, we were busy, we ended up parting ways. We got a couple other folks involved, but by that point I just said, I don't want to pursue this anymore. I don't want to legitimize the system, so I backed out of the suit.
Okay. And the other thing I was going to, the gentleman over there, that the incentive is the department gets 20% of the ticket. The revenue. The department gets 20%, the feds get 80%.
Right.
It's all revenue.
Right. Asset forfeiture is another thing. I mean,
Yes.
good point. Yeah, go ahead.
It's true that if you get caught for something and then you testify, or you challenge it in court and then you call in the police, that they get paid to be there?
Yes. Yes.
Overtime too?
Yeah, we got John Patty, managed PD employee, to admit to that in testimony up in last year after the Trump and the arrests.
So what's your impression on the legal system in general? Because once you're in the system, hiring a private attorney to navigate all this stuff, you have any thoughts on that? Because it's like a tacit endorsement.
Yeah, it's obviously subjective up to the individual. I definitely prefer myself just going what they call pro se. I've had people like, why don't you go to law school? But I just say, I don't think I need to go to school for 3 years in order to tell the truth, and so I don't like, the fact that they make legal land so convoluted is purposeful because lawyers have an incentive to perpetuate it, so they don't want to abolish the court system because that means their job doesn't go away or, still exists. So, I mean, I would encourage you, if you're at all able, there's much you can do before court, I would say, much before legal land, and that's all the public opinion stuff. So as much as you can be transparent, as much as you can personalize with folks, I mean, tactics all the way from like on the street outreach, we printed up like a few thousand DVDs in Manch when we got to do outreach there. We made these mock flyers that, we did it in Mississippi where we got arrested in mass that had like sort of the badge of the police agency, and we said, it looked like it was like a memo from the police agency that said, hey, residents of this town, we have reason to believe these people are in town. Don't go to this website, CopBlock.org. Don't do this. Don't go to their Know Your Rights meeting here and all this stuff. So this is on our flyers page, CopBlock.org/flyers if you want to see them. So in Mississippi, sheriff, this clown, he's like, oh, I appreciate it, guys. We haven't had that much traffic to our website ever, you know, and all this stuff. And in Massachusetts, the police chief was on the radio the next day, like, we're going to look into maybe filing impersonating a police officer charges against them. But that's just BS, because we never said we were police. It's just like, you know, them trying to distort everything. But I would strongly encourage you, if you're at all able. I mean, it may be different if you're going like for the civil suit, because that's even like more convoluted and stuff. But the criminal stuff, I mean, if it's clear you didn't act on wrong, if you have a video to back that up or objective evidence, or you're making it easy for people to get up to speed and to help you out. I mean, that can really, like, it can mean your charges get dropped before you even have to go to legal end, and that just goes away. So, I mean, I definitely, if you have any questions, I'm Pete at CopBlock.org. I'll definitely try to do what I can to help you. Yep, go ahead, sir.
Two comments. One is that human beings are just naturally helpful to one another, and when cops start asking you questions, that
Right.
kind of kicks in.
Right.
And that's something, counterintuitive, but you have to fight that natural instinct in yourself to be helpful.
Exactly.
Because you're just helping them screw you.
Right.
The other thing is, if you happen to come into contact with police officers in a casual way, like, friends of friends and stuff like that, don't shun
Right.
friendships with them. Try to develop friendships with police. First, you get a lot of information about the inside politics and whatever, especially if it's in your local area, and learn how their department works. And also, that's the only way that you're going to get them to rethink a lot of what their department is telling them to do. And department leaderships tend to encourage, especially in urban centers, tend to encourage isolation and separation,
Right.
and us them.
Right.
And you break that down by being friends with them.
I totally agree. The guy, like, I got arrested in Keene. I was wearing a hat and cord and thrown in a cage. And the guy who threw me on the ground and carried me out, like, he and I, I reached out to him later, and he and I met at the Starbucks a couple times for like 2 to 3 hours each time, just to like talk. And his first comment to me was, yeah, there's probably a lot more we have in common than not, and he doesn't like the feds, and he's a big gun guy and this and that. So it's like, I mean, you're totally right. I would encourage you not to perpetuate these us versus them, and to speak to your first point about it being difficult not to engage in conversations. There's some of our friends down in Philly, they're at a DUI checkpoint with signs and stuff. And so the police employee walked up to him to try to ask him questions, and no one said anything. And he went to one guy, and he's like, huh? He went to another person, and he eventually walked away. So
everybody's got cameras. The cop goes up and goes, "Do you speak English?" He goes to the next one, "Do you speak English?" And the supervisor goes, "I don't think any of them speak English."
That's pretty funny. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a nice out.